Okay, we'll get started if everyone's ready. My name is Matt Foltz. I am the new executive director for ILADD. ILADD's first executive director. This is my third week on the job. So I am new to ILADD, but not new to being executive director. Just a little brief history of me. I was the executive director at a day program in Marion County that served on an average week about 350 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I was not looking for a job change, but when I was approached and found out about ILADD and the concept and the people behind it, I was thrilled and excited to make the jump. And so I'm very excited to be here, very excited to get to know all of you. So just a little bit of a brief history about ILADD. ILADD stands for Independent Living for Adults with Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities. I'm not going to read through the slides. That's boring. And ILADD, one thing we will never be is boring. So I'll kind of just talk a little bit about some of the points here. The organization's been around in existence as a 501c3 nonprofit since 2019. Our programming has really just kind of started taking off, though, in the last year. You see there our vision, and you'll see a lot inclusive, and you'll see the word independent or interdependent a lot in our mission and in our vision, and when we talk a lot, you'll see those words as well. One thing that makes us a little bit different than other organizations is the fact that we really value our self-advocates and their input. We have 3 self-advocates on our board. They are full voting members of our board of directors, so they even had to approve my hiring. But when you look at their statements here, there's one thing that stood out to me reading these. So Katie and Alec are both on our board, and Katie says, ILADD's important to me because it represents the freedom to live independently and to grow and live life to the fullest. And Alec said, ILADD's important to me because we're, I can't see it. Remember the same opportunities and options for adults with disabilities to be independently. So what stood out to me is there's one word that is common between both of these statements, and that's the word independently, and that's important to us. And when you look at ILADD, ILADD, the first word is independent, and so that's important to us. And it's just a part of our values as an organization. When I worked in this field for years and learned a lot about the history of disability services, and in Indiana we have a little bit of a troubled history with how we've provided disability services. And there's been a little bit, especially in housing, which we'll just talk about in a moment, a little bit of a few waves when it comes to housing for adults with disabilities. 100 years ago, the answer was to institutionalize people, often against their will. And so then, unfortunately, we had people that were a little clearer thinking, and then we moved to a model where we have group homes and supported living institutions, and that's great. They're safe, and they have help with cooking, cleaning, daily activities, but a lot of them are still very segregated from our community, and so what we're trying to change is to help them become independent so they can fully integrate into our communities. So how are we going to do that? And so, what do we all need to live independently? We need to be able to practice daily living skills, social skills, to access our community, access services around us, to hold a job. These are the things that we're working on now, and Michelle Gray, our programming director, is putting together some great activities and classes and workshops that work on these exact needs. And then vocational and job opportunities. It's the same things that anyone who does not have a disability diagnosis needs to live independently is what we're trying to help those who we serve access. And then beyond even just the basic needs, housing, income, jobs, those things, exploration of hobbies, cultural interests. We all have that in our daily lives, and we have those options. So just to be able to access things that we enjoy is something that we want to bring to the people we serve. Social activities and outreach. So we do have several clubs. We have a book club, hiking club. We do game nights. We have a community service club now, which we probably need to add to the slideshow. Holiday parties, the same things that I do in my life, we want the people we serve to be able to access. I'll be at the Colts preseason game Saturday. That's something I enjoy. I'll be hiking on Sunday. So we want to give those opportunities to other individuals who may not otherwise be able to access those types of social outlets. So that's what we've been doing now. That's what we've been doing, focusing on the last few years. Is the programming aspect, and that's only going to grow. We served 10 about a year ago. Now we're up to 80 participants in our programs, and by this time next year, I think we're pretty safe to say we could double that number, probably even before then. The need is that great. And then we do outreach, which is what we're doing this evening as well. So one thing that Indiana doesn't do well, and I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I love my state, so I don't mean to bash it. But a lot of people, I talk to in this line of work, parents, and some of them may have a child who's close to aging out of the school system, and I ask about Medicaid waiver, and they don't even know what it is. And so, one thing that we've, as a society, a little bit failed at is helping people know what's next and what services are out there. And so that's what we're here for tonight, and that's why we do these regularly, is because a lot of people, for so long everything was figured out. Their child in the school system, they have great special ed programs in many of our schools, especially in this area, but they don't always have time or to think about what's next, or they don't know who to go to. And so if you know anyone in that situation, please pass on our information, because we will be having these regularly, and they can be very helpful for a lot of people. The other component of our program will eventually be a neurodiverse housing development. I know several of you I've talked to, that's what you're most excited about. And I want to stress neurodiverse, because there are other projects like ours, and there are other communities like ours that are only for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This will be a diverse neighborhood. So, I think I'm 43 years old. In 20 years, I'll be looking at retirement. I'll probably be looking to live here myself. So, so that's important about what we do. And this is conceptual, so this may not be the final product, obviously, as we get through it. It's, construction's a little bit of a messy business. But what we want, and if you see, when we talk about accessibility, in this idea, we have lots of paths. Everything's accessible for our residents. There would be our large community center up at the top, and we would run programming, social options out of there. Things like rec therapy, occupational therapy. We would have the opportunity to have services come in and be provided out of that center. So that's very important, because a lot of our, the people we serve, transportation is a problem for them. And so that's our goal, is to make things as accessible as possible for the people in our community who need those services. There's a couple of other renderings here. And again, this is all conceptual right now. May not look like that in the final product, but this is what we're wanting to do. And there's a picture of what would be our community center in the front. And these are a few ways to connect with us. We are always needing volunteers. If you know anyone who's looking to volunteer, we're a volunteer-heavy program, and we want to be able to provide more services and more social outlets. So if you know anyone who's looking to volunteer, please reach out. And we do have a Facebook page as well, so you can find us on Facebook. We are also looking to start providing a few one-off type classes for the participants in our program. So if you are someone who wants to just give 2 hours on a Saturday and come teach a class about something that you're an expert on, if you're fluent in ASL, or you're a professional chef, or you're a hiring manager and you want to talk about how to prepare for a job interview, any of the types of things that will help with independent living skills, we'd love to have you reach out, and love to have you come in and give a little bit of a talk and help the people we serve access, again, some of those things in our community that we can help provide for them. So any questions, I'll be here until the end, and we will have a question period as well. So feel free to hit me up with my third week on the job. I may not have all of the answers, but if not, I will find them to you. Not to be like a press secretary and try to stall. But so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Michelle Gray, our program manager, and we will get started with the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I'm very honored to work alongside him even 3 weeks into it. I'm super excited. So we are here tonight to address, if I can get it going, the issue and topic of future financial planning. And we have two different speakers who will be presenting with us tonight. This is a little bit of we had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and hopefully some of you, I see a lot of familiar faces who are also present for that. This is a little bit more additional information. You guys should have an agenda, and if you can write down any questions that you have along the way for our speakers, we would love for you to be able to ask questions. So if you, I think everybody probably already signed in. I just wanted to also say, as Matt had emphasized, we are very much in the process now of planning for our 2023 events and calendars. So if you could take a minute to complete your survey and let us know what type of topics you would like to hear presented, what types of clubs, organizations, events, classes would be beneficial for you or your self-advocates to be involved in. We would very much appreciate your ideas. So. Restrooms are outside to the left, and snacks and waters are over at the table. Please feel free to help yourself. Like I said, we have two speakers, and then following both speakers, we will have a question and answer session. So we'll get right to introducing. Our first speaker is our own Deb Easterday. Deb received her degree from Economics and Business Administration from Hillsdale College and earned her JD from the University of Indiana, Indianapolis. Specialized in financial institutions law, practicing as counsel for Merchants National Bank, chief counsel for National City Bank, and finally senior counsel for the law firm Craig DeVault. She retired from the active practice of law when her children were in middle school and became a professional volunteer. She was a co-founder and president of the Parent Education and Advisory Council of Zionsville, which is an organization formed to educate and advise families on their rights in special education. She served for several years as a member and chairman of the board for IPEN, which is now referred to as About Special Kids. And as she has been a member and a chairman of the board for the ARC of Greater Boone County. She's volunteered for over 20 years with Special Olympics as a coach, a member of the regional team, and a member and chairman of the board of Special Olympics Indiana. She is one of our organizing founders for ILADD and is a member of our program committee who puts on events such as this. She has also served in many ministries at her church, St. Alphonsus Catholic Church in Zionsville, and she is here tonight putting on her attorney hat to share with us on the topic of able accounts. Please welcome Deb.
Thanks, Michelle. So you're probably confused because you're seeing three ladies listed up there as your presenters. And what's happened is the first two were my first choices for this job. And they're traveling. They're doing their COVID trip. So I'm here, but they were very kind and they provided me a lot of information from presentations that they have made in the past for this. It disappeared. There we go. So what is ABLE? Well, ABLE stands for the Stephen Beck Jr. Achieving a Better Life closer. Last time there was somebody who was really close, and so I'm really sensitive to that. Anyway, achieving, is that okay? Or is it too... Achieving a Better Life Experience Act. And the purpose of the law is to recognize the reality of the fact that people with disabilities necessarily have a greater financial burden during their lives. And so what this act does is it allows for tax-free savings accounts for some of those individuals with disabilities to save for certain expenses, what's going to be called qualified disability expenses, and not risk losing their public benefits. These accounts are actually established as 529 accounts, and they're under the purview of the IRS. They're designed to supplement, not replace, benefits that are provided by the government, such as SSI and Medicaid, which are means-based, or from other services, quite frankly, such as employer benefits or even insurance benefits. So who can own one of these accounts? An account owner must be defined or must meet the definition of an eligible individual. And that is a person who has a disability that was present before the age of 26, and one of the following is true. They either already receive benefits under SSI or SSDI, or essentially they can certify that they could. And so that's what this self-certification is. The person certifies that they either have blindness, as defined by the Social Security Act, or a medically determinable physical or mental impairment with marked and severe functional limitation that has lasted or is expected to last at least 12 months or end in death. And then they also need a written diagnosis affirming that the disability meets this definition. That diagnosis must be signed by a licensed physician. It must be a medical doctor. It cannot be a psychologist or a clinical therapist or even a counselor. Examples of disabilities that will meet this definition for Social Security can actually be found in their Blue Book. So if the eligible individual is not actually able to exercise signature authority, or in other words, they really don't have the capacity to execute a contract, then an authorized individual can open that account on their behalf. Or there can be an authorized individual appointed or chosen by the eligible individual to help with that account. And that authorized individual can have a variety of powers, and it will depend on the assignment that is, or the power of attorney that is actually executed by the authorized or the eligible individual as to what the powers of that particular authorized individual is, assuming that, of course, the eligible individual has the power to do that. So in order of priority, an authorized individual could be the agent of the eligible individual under a power of attorney, as we're talking about, the legal guardian or conservator, a spouse, and a spouse does not include a domestic partner for these purposes, a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, or the representative payee under SSA. Now, the authorized individual can be required to certify, and typically Indiana does require them to certify, that they are an authorized individual within one of these classes, and there's actually no other authorized individual in a class more prior who is either willing or able to serve in that capacity. Now, the authorized individual, of course, must not acquire any interest in that account. It is the account owner's account only, and the authorized individual, of course, must always act for the benefit of that account owner. Now, how are the accounts funded? Well, ABLE accounts are only funded by cash, but the sources of that cash can come from a variety of places. So it could be from the account owner's friends and family, which often are major sources, an employer, a trust, estate funds. Anything that is actually recognized as a legal entity under the law can be a donor or a contributor to that account. There is an annual limitation that is set at the federal level. This year it's $16,000, and that's actually kind of tied to the amount that an individual could donate and not have to pay or report for gift tax purposes. That changes. There's a bit of an exception to that under the able to work provisions. So if the owner of the account actually has a job, is employed, that owner of the account could donate or contribute, I shouldn't say donate, contribute an additional amount up to the gross amount of the earnings for that year, or the lesser of the federal poverty level. And that changes from year to year. So this year, that's $12,880. So theoretically, an account owner could actually this year contribute up to $28,880 to that ABLE account, assuming they made at least that much. There's a caveat to that, though, because an account owner cannot take advantage of that able to work extension if his or her employer actually made contributions to a defined contribution plan for that employee. There's also a cumulative contribution. That means over the life of this account. In Indiana, that's $450,000, which is similar to other 529 accounts. The methods that can be used are just about any method that you can use to transfer cash. So that's going to be check and electronic funds transfer, direct deposit, wire transfer, and then there's a special service that's been set up for this called UGift. That enables people to contribute either by an electronic funds transfer with a special code for that account or by check with a special coupon for that account. There are also the possibilities of contributions by rollover. These are unusual, and they have pretty stiff rules with respect to what the compliance is and what the timing is in order to do it correctly. But where that would come in is if an owner of an account, you can only have one account, just one. And so if the owner of an account had set one up in Illinois, for example, moved to Indiana, decided he liked the provisions of the Indiana code accounts better, they could roll over the account from the Illinois ABLE account over into the Indiana account. But you need to make sure that you contact those different state departments to make sure that we follow all the rules to get it done. Remember that the funds in an ABLE account are actually meant to supplement and not replace benefits that are provided by other sources of income. So a person who is looking at an ABLE account should always keep that in mind, because the first thing you want to use to fund whatever the expenses are those other sources, as opposed to the ABLE account sources, so that they can actually grow, because they're going to grow tax-free until they're spent. Well, how do you spend them, and what can you spend them on? Qualified disability expenses. And these are any expenses that are incurred by the owner and as an eligible individual, so in other words, they are still meeting that definition, to maintain or improve their health, independence, or quality of life. And that's the key. So qualified expenses can include, but they're not limited to, and the IRS has listed a bunch of categories, and you'll notice that they're relatively general categories. They've declined to actually provide a fully exhaustive list of what those expenses could be, because they're going to be determined by the needs and the circumstances of each individual who is looking at this account and looking to spend money to maintain or improve their health, their independence, or quality of life. Their circumstances are going to be different. So you've got, as I said, some basic categories down here. The one that's of most interest to a lot of people is actually the housing, because that's going to include mortgage payment, rent payment, real property taxes, heat, fuel, gas, electric, water, and sewer. Those payment of these should not impair, should not affect the SSI benefits that the owner is receiving. That's part of the purpose. Again, ABLE accounts have special tax advantages in that the savings can grow and they can be withdrawn tax-free. They won't count as income so long as they're qualified disability expenses. The other side of that, if the savings are used for non-qualified expenses, the earnings portion of that withdrawal will be treated as income for the owner. It will then be taxed at the owner's tax rate, which, as a practical matter, probably isn't going to be that large, but it could also be subject to a 10% federal tax penalty and also applicable state taxes. There's also a nice provision from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, which added able owners as persons who are eligible for the Savers Credit. So under that provision, an able account owner could be eligible for a tax credit for up to $2,000 for contributions from their income that is then saved within their able account. There's a restriction for those as well, though. You have to be at least 18 years, not a student, and not claimed as a dependent on another person's tax return. Again, a generous feature of this ABLE account is that there's no impact on means-tested government benefits. Again, there's a except for, and that is balances of $100,000 or less are excluded, but if you go over $100,000, then the amount that's over will be combined with whatever other resources that the owner has, and if they exceed the resource limit, then SSI will be suspended. It won't be terminated, it'll be suspended until the account balance falls down to the appropriate level. The good part of it also is that you will maintain eligibility. You won't, your Medicaid eligibility will not be suspended. You'll maintain that eligibility. That's the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that's during the lifetime of the owner. At the owner's death, the ABLE account may be subjected to payback claims by Medicaid at the state level for all those Medicaid expenses that they may have paid since the ABLE account was opened, but after any qualified disability expenses that were outstanding, including expenses of death and funeral, remember, are paid. Indiana's ABLE Act plan is actually operated under the National ABLE Alliance, which was established by a consortium of states across the United States. And as Indiana is a member of the alliance, it adopted an addendum to that master plan, if you will, to establish their product. And under it, Indiana offers 6 investment products and then the checking account feature. All of the disclosures pertaining to those investment accounts and the plan and Indiana's addendum are online on their website at Investable, and there's the site to it at the end of this. I encourage you to read those, boring as they may be, but the best part of it is you can call, once you've read them and you say, I have no idea what this means, you can call and they will explain your questions to you. They'll answer your questions. What's nice about this is the owner or the authorized individual on their behalf or together can make a choice to either go with one of these investments or go with any of these investments and allocate an amount of all their contributions per investment. So you can go 20, 20, 20, however it is you want to do it once you've read your disclosure statements about these accounts. You can do that. You can actually change your mind twice a year. And any allocation reordering because of a distribution will not count as a change of choice. And any time that you want to determine that a contribution shall go into a different source investment for the future, you can do that too, and that won't count as a change of choice. Change of choice. The costs for an Indiana ABLE account are really relatively small. You open the account with as little as $25, and there are minimum contribution requirements of $25 per. There are maintenance fees for the account. As you can see, they're $14.75 per quarter unless you decide to elect electronic statements and confirmations, and then they're discounted to $8.50. That's going to equate to about $59 a year or $34 discounted. If you choose investment options, there will also be fees related to those options. But again, those are not that expensive. It's 0.34% to 0.37%, which would be annual asset-based fees. And of course, there will be fees for the checkbook feature, just like any other checking account. But again, the monthly balance fee, or the monthly fees, will be waived if you keep a minimum balance of $250 or elect electronic statement deliveries. It's pretty easy to enroll. You go online and you can either download the documents and then send them in, or you can do it right online. Again, you should read all the disclosure statements first and then choose what options you think are appropriate for you, depending on your circumstances and what you think your goals are. And you provide all of the information that they need on the forms, which we've already discussed pretty well. This is the state's warnings and disclaimers, basically telling you where you can get more information, warning you to make sure you read everything, explaining who they are and what their plan is all about, and then telling you, of course, that the material that they provide is general and for educational purposes only. There is no specific or individual advice given. But really, they do answer questions for you with respect to what it all means. So a couple weeks ago, we did talk a bit about special needs trusts, the first party, the third party, and the pooled. And these are also well-established savings tools, and Gordon's also going to talk about how to fund those tonight. They all, many of them, have an intent, as part of their intent, to protect eligibility for public programs. But how do you choose what to use, the ABLE account or the trusts, or, quite frankly, both? And so because the rules for each are pretty different, you can take a look at what kinds of factors you might want to take a look at. But really, it's important for families, once they decide that they want to either invest or save, or, you know, how is it that we're going to get this done, is sit down and talk about, review your specific circumstances, your financial issues, what your goals are, what you're actually intending to do both as a family and as the owner, the person with the disability, and then consult. I really advise consulting, not because I'm a lawyer, because I don't do this, a special needs planning attorney before really going through all of these. So some of the factors you're going to look at is whether or not you're eligible. You know, if you don't meet some of those requirements for the ABLE account, such as having your disability prior to the age of 26 or fall within the definition provided, then an ABLE account really isn't an option. Special needs trusts can be established with far broader parameters as far as who is eligible to be a beneficiary of those. Again, the startup and ongoing costs are going to be quite different between the trusts or the ABLE account. The ABLE account is really relatively cheap. A special needs trust can be pretty complex and should use a lawyer to actually draft it, to make sure that it's appropriately drafted to meet the requirements, to avoid running afoul of the means-based test issues, and making sure that it actually accomplishes what the settlor of the trust wants to do. However, there really are no real minimum deposit contributions requirements to actually establish a trust. You don't necessarily have to fund it right away, with exception of the ARC trust, where you might have to actually get it started with the cost of the enrollment fee. Definitely, they're going to have additional fees. They're going to have whatever investment types of, whatever the corpus of the trust is. So there will probably be investment-related fees, property management fees. You're going to have to pay the trustee for their efforts, their time and expertise, if you will, for managing. Another factor that you might want to consider is the oversight. ABLE accounts offer a lot greater financial independence for the account owner. They're in charge, along with their authorized individual, if they choose to have one, they're actually in charge of deciding what they're contributing to it, what the expenditures are going to be, and what the investments are going to be. The trust situation, the trustee makes those decisions. All administration, distributions, and investments are within the purview of the trustee. Is there a funding cap? ABLE accounts, of course, have funding caps. Special needs trusts have no funding restrictions. Is there going to be an impact on Social Security or means-based or means-tested benefits? For an ABLE account, there will not be, as long as the asset is $100,000 or less. For special needs trusts, sometimes they run into problems with respect to this issue because Social Security will determine if those funds have been used to meet food or shelter needs or have been directly used for support and maintenance, and then make a determination that that beneficiary really doesn't need Social Security, and so they could reduce or actually terminate those benefits. What types of property can be contributed? You know, it depends. So this will be an issue with respect to what kinds of property you have and what you might want to be able to do with it. Well, with an ABLE account, all you can use is cash. Special needs trusts can have all sorts of property as their corpus. So investment products, insurance proceeds, estate proceeds, property of any kind, you know, real or personal, along with money. Are there investment options? Of course, with the ABLE accounts, they are limited to the 6 that are available from the state's product. There are other states, and I don't honestly know what the other options in other states might be, but it's worth looking at because you don't have to get your ABLE account in the state in which you live. Many states allow other people to come in and get ABLE accounts. There are very few states that actually require you to be a resident of their state. Special needs trusts, of course, can be highly tailored to whatever the goals will be, and whatever the investments typically are will be as varied as what's available in the market. Is there a restriction on the use of funds? Well, in ABLE accounts, of course, you've got to use them for a qualified disability expense to not run afoul of the tax laws. The special needs trusts are under the auspices of the trustee's discretion and under the terms of the trust, so it's going to depend on how that trust was set up. They have a broader range of expenditures with the exception of what I already talked about with support and maintenance problems. But so they can be used for things that aren't necessarily what you would define under the qualified disability expense. You know, in both of those instances, in all of those instances, what's really going to be important for the person making the expenditures is to make sure you document the expenses, the expenditures that you've made. Number one, what it cost, keep your receipts, and number two, why you made it. How does it qualify, especially under the ABLE Act? Why did you consider it to be something that would be a qualified disability expense? Tax considerations, of course, we've talked about with the ABLE accounts being able to grow tax-free. Special needs trusts are entities in and of themselves, so they're going to have their own taxes. Any income that they make is going to be taxed. It's going to be taxed at the trust level, however, and the trust is who has to actually make the filing. Medicaid estate recovery. That's kind of the downside of an ABLE account, in my opinion, because, of course, if the owner dies prior to using all of the funds in that account, well, then they are going to be subject to Medicaid payback after the payment of other qualified disability expenses are made. So an ABLE account really isn't something that you would use as a tool to amass savings that you're just going to let sit there and grow for years and years and years. You're going to want to use it like you would a savings account for one of those very particular reasons. It's also not going to be an ideal vehicle for managing third-party funds for a similar reason. Special needs trusts, of course, are funds. The third-party trusts are those that have been owned and put into the trust by someone other than the beneficiary, so they're not subject to the Medicaid payback. First party could be if the Medicaid estate recovery predates the establishment of that trust. And then the pooled trusts we talked about last time, they vary. They vary from state to state, and they vary from trust to trust. The interesting thing about the ARC Trust number 2, if you will recall, they have sort of a payback claim against the corpus of whatever's left, and that is they'll get 50% in that trust number 2 of the funds that might be remaining in it upon the death of the beneficiary. So are you stuck with just choosing one or the other? Absolutely not. You probably should use both, and they're used for different purposes. You would want to use this special needs trust for managing those significant third-party contributions, the estate planning tool, the future planning tool. The ABLE account can actually be partially funded by those trusts, and can also be used to provide more choice and control for the account owner and for the beneficiary and the family, because the owner maintains the ability to control those funds and determine how they're spent and whether or not to even save them at times. Just because you've opened the account doesn't mean you have to constantly put money into it. And if circumstances change, well, then there are still other options available to that account owner. You can help a person with a disability, as it shows up there, learn greater financial management skills and responsibility by funding that ABLE account slowly and utilizing it in that manner. The ABLE account is also very useful to save funds for the beneficiary's future housing expenses, sort of like that over there. That's what we're using Matt's for. You know, whatever extra little income he might have had from his job and whatever might be left over in that rep payee account at the end of the year. You know, there's often things that might be left over in there and you have to put it in a savings account. Well, this is a good vehicle for that. And we can start saving up for maybe the furniture. It's sort of like his hope chest. So once again, we have the caveat at the bottom that the information is not intended to replace a more individualized plan. Get advice from those people that are important in your life, your accountant, your financial advisor, your lawyer, etc. So there you have it, ABLE accounts in a nutshell. I think questions at the end.
Thank you, Deb. I think we are particularly lucky to have our next speaker with us. If you've seen this event advertised, we actually had another speaker lined up and that person fell through. So at the last minute, Gordon was able to fill the slot and we are super excited to have him with us. Gordon Holmes is a certified financial planner professional whose practice focuses on financial and estate planning for families who have a child or dependent with special needs. He has a unique perspective through his experience both as a financial professional and a parent. He assists with financial and government benefit issues faced by families, including access to legal professionals, special needs trusts, guardianship, Social Security, and Medicaid. A frequent speaker at parent groups, state and national conferences, he has contributed to articles in the Washington Post, New York Times, and Kiplinger's Financial or Personal Finance. And then you said you had an assignment to the ABLE. State ABLE Board. So when Deb heard that, she said he could have just done the entire presentation, but we're glad that she was able to share with us. But we would like to welcome Gordon to the microphone. Yes.
It's the first step. After hearing Deb's presentation, I think I'll recommend a Amy Corbin, the state director of ABLE, that we include Deb on our rotation there. She did a marvelous job. In fact, she sure did. Only one thing actually that came to mind that I could add to it. I was very impressed. Earlier this year, the Indiana legislature passed House Bill 1303, and it has, like 529 accounts, created the opportunity upcoming for a tax credit for contributions made to the InvestAble 529A accounts here in Indiana. So Deb mentioned that you can set up an ABLE account in a number of states. And so the ABLE authority lobbied the Indiana legislature to create a tax credit for Indiana ABLE accounts so that you would have an incentive to keep your ABLE money right here in Indiana, just as many of you are familiar with the tax credit for the 529 college choice accounts, where there's a tax credit as well. So the tax credit for regular 529 accounts is going up from $1,000 to $1,500. So that's exciting news. So that will represent 20% on the first $7,500 versus 20% on the first $5,000, as we've had for many years. And with that comes ABLE. So they couldn't give something to regular college accounts without throwing a bone to ABLE accounts. And so the credit for ABLE accounts will be 20% on the first $2,500 contributed each year. And this will be a tax credit on the state income tax return, not federal. And it will be a credit to the person making the contribution. So if a parent or grandparent is wanting to make the contribution and they are a resident of Indiana, meaning they file an Indiana state income tax return, then there will be a tax credit, and that starts with January of 24, excuse me. So there's a little ramp up time, but that will be with the calendar and or tax year 2024. They always pass those things and then allow time for implementation, et cetera. So some time for that coming. But it'll be interesting because in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about what we call transference. Because if your child with special needs or disability is generating income through employment, through Social Security benefits, et cetera, sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to keep them under the $2,000 resource limit that Deb was talking about a little earlier. Now, there has been proposals in Congress at the federal level, not state, but at the federal level, to raise the $2,000 Medicaid resource limit. Well, at least some of you, not everyone, some of you have been around long enough to remember when in Indiana the Medicaid resource limit was $1,500. It only became $2,000 when we became a 1634 state in May of 2006, I think it was. So only 16 years ago did the resource limit for Medicaid go from $1,500 in Indiana to $2,000. But there is a proposal currently afloat, and these things take years, so this is just a little bit of a tease. But there is a proposal to raise that limit substantially. There's no cost of living attached to it. It's been the same for decades. It didn't buy much then, and it certainly does not buy much now. It's nice to have the ABLE account as a kind of a stopgap measure, but the resource limit, hopefully, within the next 5 years, let's say, will increase, and that'll give opportunities to rise above 2,000 without having to utilize ABLE. But so exciting things happening on the on the ABLE front, and it especially is a good option when you just can't keep the kid under $2,000. And usually this is, frankly, a combination of Social Security benefits and some amount of earned income. It's the combination that sometimes just deals a really tough blow. And, I don't know, the gentleman in the blue shirt, what's your last name? Wormington, okay. So it just may be a little challenging to assess a monthly fee of $2,000 for their adult child to live at the Wormington estate. I'm just saying. And yet if charges are not assessed, at an adequate level, if Social Security benefits rise north of $1,000 a month and there's part-time employment and so forth, it starts to become a challenge as to just what we can do with the funds. Well, ABLE account, as Deb so eloquently reviewed, is one option to transfer money away from the child without having to have an expense of the moment to justify that transfer. So that's pretty exciting. But with the Medicaid payback, we look for other options that are available. And so we're going to, ILADD, there's only one ILADD reference. And I'm sorry if it didn't sort.
That's okay. There it is.
Wonderful. Okay. And I have probably more to cover and I whittled the slides down to under 20 slides. But I'm so excited always about the opportunity to share. I have 3 children of my own. The youngest is 27. He's on the autism spectrum. He also has a hyper-aggressive case of Crohn's disease. So we're very thankful for IU Health and the medical community that has been so faithful to assist our son. By age 15, he had already been split open sternocleidomastoid 4 times, had an ostomy, and had gone septic. And we saw the very negative side of having an aggressive case of Crohn's disease. So through a personal journey of dealing with autism spectrum issues and IEPs and government benefits and then all the medical issues and so forth, it certainly has prepared me well for a life of service to other families as I seek to be a part of the solution, a part of the answer to getting where we want to go for our very special kids. So this evening we're going to talk about funding, and let's see, that's my disclosure. We're not all things to all people. We try very hard. And I have a team that supports my efforts. And I do want to take a moment to just quickly review the items that are in your folders, if we can do that. This is the practice brochure. I have an office that's very close to here, 96th and College, so very close. In addition to that, this highlights our team. And I have a wonderful group of people that support our efforts. We had a couple of Kelly School IU kids with us over the summer that was a great help. But we work with about 3,000 families throughout Indiana and Kentucky. I have both the office here and office in Louisville. I'm usually in Louisville about 5 days a month, and otherwise up here when I'm not around the state speaking and that type of thing. But again, we work with a very large number of families throughout the state, and the focus is both the legal, the financial, and the government benefit issues. I'm a bit quirky in that regard, a deep dive into SSI and SSDI and all the nuances of Social Security as well as Medicaid and the waiver programs, both from a here locally a SACOA standpoint as opposed to the BEADS office and so forth. So, in fact, I would welcome the opportunity to come back and do a deep dive into the various government benefits and how you can squeeze more out of them and advocate for your loved one with special needs to have confidence that you're getting the most in the way of government benefits, because I sit down with families, Zoom, in person, et cetera, regularly, and they're not 100% of what can be accessed. There's more there, and it's an awareness issue, and you cannot Google this stuff. I mean, it's just not that easily accessible, and it also varies by state. And is what you're reading going to be accurate or not, this type of thing. So I'm very passionate about advocating for families and making sure that we're getting the most. It's our tax dollars at work, and we all contribute, and so we certainly want to get our fair share. So would love to come back and do an evening on government benefits. You'll love it. Sometimes I do national. Humana's had me do 2 sessions on government benefits at a national level for all their associates nationwide that have children with special needs, and those are really exciting opportunities to share stuff, and it's quite eye-opening. What you have here, oh, by the way, there's also an evaluation form, and do me the favor of completing this. We're going to do a drawing, and somewhere there's an Amazon gift card floating around here somewhere, okay? Yeah, okay, fantastic. There we go. And so we're going to do a drawing for the Amazon gift card that I brought this evening. Got to have a little fun while we're talking about this serious stuff. And so do me the favor, please, of completing the evaluation form. We'll collect them while we're doing Q&A or whatever, and then we'll pluck one of them out, and somebody will take home the Amazon gift card. And I'm thankful to bring that this evening. Okay, so up on the screen currently is our 10 comprehensive planning steps. And not enough time, of course, to cover all of this evening, but these represent topics that can be addressed in future sessions. And what's really nice about coming here is that I live 5 minutes from here. So sometimes as I head off to anywhere from Fort Wayne to Maryville or whatever, my wife will ask, is there anyone locally that needs help where, you wouldn't have to be on the road for 3 or 4 hours to go talk or that type of thing? So when I shared with her I was coming over to Zionsville, she's like, right on, yes. So delighted to be here, would love to come back, that type of thing. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, digging deeper into how to fund special needs trusts, administering trusts, legal structures. Special needs planning is complicated, but we have processes in place. That's the only way we've been able to assist 3,000 families is by having well-established, well-organized processes where you do not get meetinged to death, and where every meeting counts, and we create plans that you can be very confident with, also so that you can have an adult conversation possibly with a sibling of your child with special needs and feel like you've got your ducks in a row and you've taken care of business. Now, over at the right, Special Needs Trusts, and I know that Bob Feckman was here not more than, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Bob and I have known each other for over 20 years. In fact, he went into special needs law at a similar time frame to where I've began focusing on it because of my personal journey about 25 years ago. And so we've grown our practices together and have had the opportunity to work with thousands of families working together. But there are numerous types of special needs trusts, and it's really important to find what trust is appropriate for the problem we're trying to solve, because they're not all created equal and they're not all the same. And unfortunately, making mistakes can be very costly, and mistakes can be made that you're not even aware have been made. You may pass away, and it's not until you have departed that mistakes are found. So I've developed a network of attorneys throughout Indiana and Kentucky. There are about a dozen attorneys, and through that extension, we're able to assist with estate planning, also doing Social Security appeals, Medicaid administrative hearings, dealing with settlement issues from litigation, and so forth. So just a wide range of legal issues that we're a part of. Okay, types of trust, boy, a bunch, yes. One type of trust that Bob may have not spoken about is the Qualified Disability Trust that's down on the list. And Deb mentioned that special needs trusts are often their own entity, function, especially third-party trusts, typically function under their own tax ID number, and so forth. In the case of the Qualified Disability Trust, if the trust is set up in such a fashion and is irrevocable, the potential exists that it could qualify for a special exemption, which currently sits at $4,400 a year. And so you can have a lot of money in a trust cranking interest, dividends, and capital gains and not pay a dime in taxes if it qualifies as a qualified disability trust and therefore gets that very high exemption. So there are opportunities in planning. It's just, it's helpful to work with attorneys like Bob and special needs planners like myself that know more, because we eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, and we're able to bring to the table things that other practitioners that don't deal with it on a daily basis don't know about. And you just have to, it has to be a huge focus, and I'm constantly on calls and reading and at participating in continuing education, et cetera, because this stuff is changing. As recent as the Secure Act that we're going to talk about. Secure Act did not get a lot of attention because Congress managed to pass that right as we headed into COVID. So that was January of 2020. And then COVID hit and no one talked about the Secure Act. Well, it affected special needs trusts in a significant way, but the message simply was not out on that. And so we will attempt to touch on that this evening, since that deals with trust funding and what assets you want to pair with funding a special needs trust. Okay, so determining how much. I manage tens of millions of dollars of trust assets as a part of my practice. So I don't just participate in academic exercises of setting up documents and planning for the future, but I mean, every day I'm working with actual trust accounts and everything from situations with people with substantial disabilities, 24/7 care required, et cetera, to individuals that are higher functioning where the trust functions to actually provide a monthly allowance for them, so that as they struggle to try to keep a job or keep themselves afloat, it makes sure that the food is purchased and the apartment rent is made and that they don't go under. So I get emails from these trust beneficiaries, and I'm a soft touch. They know I care. And so sometimes I become their advocate with the trustee. Sometimes that's Bob. And so we work together for the benefit of these trust beneficiaries, but I care for them deeply. Sometimes their stories are gut-wrenching. Sometimes it is just funny. It's like you can't make up this stuff. Oh, well. Okay, so we want the trust to support their, to be independent. Again, that term comes up. To support potential ability to work, medical needs as they have it, residential needs, social and entertainment. That's huge. And, of course, it's all focused on quality of life. So consider what would happen if one or both of the parents were not around. What would it cost to replace all the caregiving and or income support? In other words, the government's focus is primarily on food, shelter, and health care. And to be frank with you, that's where we were 50 years ago when our loved ones were institutionalized. And isn't it amazing that life expectancy was in the 20s? And now we're seeing individuals with Down syndrome make it to the 70s. And medical science has certainly advanced, but it has more to do with quality of life than it does advancements in medical science. Give a person a reason to live and they stay around. It ain't rocket science. And so special needs trusts and the funding of trusts, and now more recently ABLE accounts, have everything to do with how do we fund the quality. Now, while we as parents are around, we'll do anything for them. We'll go to the mat for them. We'll advocate for them. We'll fight for them. We'll do whatever it takes. But when we exit the picture, if we're very blessed, we may have an adult sibling that's going to help. But of course, it's not the same as the parents. And so as we pass the baton, so to speak, to some other family member, what are we passing with a baton? Is it an adult that needs help and needs attention, or are we also passing a broad array of government benefits, a well-funded trust to pay for what the government can't or won't? Detailed instructions about everything, an owner's manual, everything that they're going to need to know. Everything from how to handle a case conference meeting to who's doing case management to direct service providers and routines and schedules and the doctors, the medications, and on it goes. I mean, how well are we equipping the next generation to step up? And it is so powerful to have the situation in hand and well equipped when you have that conversation with family. Is this making sense? It just drives that whole conversation. Because instead of you will, won't you, instead it's like we've done this is in place, et cetera. It's a well-oiled machine, and it's amazing. So we try to create those positive types of outcomes for families because it's the glue that holds things together, and it makes family a lot more willing to step up and embrace, being helpful. Okay, government benefits are divided into two categories. Not time tonight to go into all of these, but suffice to say there are a lot of government benefits. And how you plan can have to do with how rich these benefits are. Many younger parents are unaware that SSI is usually short-lived, that in most cases SSI only lasts until a parent retires. And then SSI goes away. It's typically replaced with what we call an adult child benefit, adult child benefits there. And your child with special needs or disability, if they're drawing SSI or you expect them to draw SSI, this type of thing, then that's only until they can draw off of your wage record. And drawing off of your wage record is where the big money is, let me tell you. It's huge. Most of those benefits eclipse SSI big time. It's not unusual for, even while you're living and retired, for a child to be drawing a benefit off of your wage record of anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a month. And then I had someone in my office today that recently lost a parent, And so they went from drawing off of the parent to drawing a survivor benefit off of the parent. It's one of the larger benefits I've seen. But their adult child with special needs, once Social Security processes the claim from the deceased parent, will be drawing over $2,100 a month. You heard it right. Over $2,100 a month, and that's even before cost of living kicks in for next year. And we're looking for about 8%. We're talking $2,300 a month that 20-some-odd-year-old will be drawing with cost of living increases for the rest of his life. And that's a benefit that is not even adversely affected by wages. He can go get a part-time job earning $500, $600, $700 a month and get that on top of the Social Security benefit of $2,100, $2,200, $2,300 a month. Now we're talking approaching $3,000 a month. Is everybody with me? These are attention-getting numbers. So how do you, in a situation like that, maintain eligibility for benefits with a $2,000 resource limit that they're flying by monthly? So it's exciting, but at the same time, some of these issues get a little more complicated. So let me tell you, help is a really good thing. And we help families with these issues because they're wonderful issues to have. This whole issue of employment, I got to tell you, as recent as 5 years ago, most everyone with special needs was getting minimum wage. The thought of wages of $10, $12, $14, $15+ an hour 5 years ago wasn't even on the horizon. And oh my gosh, now we're seeing it all the time. Seeing situations where they're earning $12, $13, $14, $15 an hour. And then we have to be cognizant of the SGA, or substantial gainful activity limit, because if their earnings rise above a certain level on a monthly basis, they may put their SSI at risk, their Medicaid, their waiver at risk, and also the risk to future draw off of a parent's record, like the $2,100 plus per month. So the stakes are really high on this stuff. And if we navigate well, this stuff is worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars during the lifetime of our loved one with special needs. But again, there's a lot at stake. Mistakes can easily be made, and they're very expensive. So this is why I'm so passionate to help families navigate this stuff. Okay. As far as drawing off of a parent at the time of disability, parent at the time of retirement, or parent at the time of death. So those are the triggers for drawing off of a parent's record. So I think of those three options, I think retirement's probably the more attractive, versus death or disability and so forth. But any of those three will do, so to speak, and then a child can draw off of a parent's record. But there are criteria to be eligible. And that's part of what we work on when we meet with families to determine, how many legs of the stool do you have in place? Are you hurting your case, or are you helping it? Because these benefits are worth a fortune, Okay, something new that we're seeing also, kids are starting to draw off of their own disability benefits. They're actually becoming eligible for Social Security disability from their part-time employment. Younger kids, you might be shocked to learn, they only need 6 quarters. In less than 2 years, they can have enough quarters to draw Social Security disability off of themselves. From working part-time. I'm talking only getting $500, $600 a month in income. And when they're earning $12, $13, and $14 an hour, we're talking like working 10 hours a week. We're talking minimal employment, and yet they're racking up enough income to start being eligible to draw off of their own wage record or their own earnings record, and subsequently become eligible for Medicare. So exciting stuff that we're seeing. Okay, so funding sources available for a trust, investment accounts, mutual funds, checking and savings accounts, retirement accounts, and the Secure Act. So just briefly, and somebody is going to give me a 5-minute warning, right? Okay, because I could talk for days. I mean, there is so much, and it is so exciting. This stuff is positive stuff. This isn't bad news. It's great news. But the point I want to make with the Secure Act, since I brought it up, is they did a carve-out with the Secure Act, January of 2020, and the carve-out is for an individual with a disability or a qualified trust. And the great news is that they qualify like the old rules, and you can actually leave IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, simples, SEPs, and so forth to a qualified special needs trust, and they get the lifetime stretch unlike everybody else. Everybody else, except for a spouse, pretty much, there's a few exceptions, but for the most part, everybody else, non-spouse, only has 10 years to take the money. So if you have a living parent and they have retirement funds that are going to roll downhill to you, okay, and you're not the spouse, you're the child, you're only going to have 10 years. The stretching for life is gone. They did away with that with the Secure Act. Okay, so when Congress spends money, they try to figure out a way to recoup the money they're spending. And they were, that's part of trying to minimize the cost of the Secure Act. So as a non-spouse, you only have 10 years unless you have a disability or the Special Needs Trust is a beneficiary. So used to be, we tried to shy away from leaving qualified funds to a Special Needs Trust because people thought you'll have to pay taxes on the whole thing right out of the gate for it to go into the trust. But what's really exciting is you actually can have a beneficiary IRA holding hundreds of thousands of dollars of qualified money, pre-tax, and stretch it out over the lifetime of the trust beneficiary and minimize the taxes. Boy, talking about exciting stuff. So now instead of shying away from putting qualified funds in a special needs trust, it's like bring it on, because you'll minimize the taxes, where a non-disabled beneficiary or a non-special needs trust probably limited to having to pay taxes on the whole thing in how many years? 10. That could be a lot of tax. If you're talking $500,000, you're talking about either taking 50 grand a year or more, or taking all 500,000 in the 10th year. Everybody with me? That's a big tax hit, but tremendous advantage now that comes with Special Needs Trust. Life insurance is a very popular funding option for funding a Special Needs Trust. Help me out here. Why do you think that would be a popular option? You're concerned about that trust being funded when what happens? Yeah, you die. What provides a benefit when you die? Life insurance. Okay, so it's obvious that life insurance becomes a very popular tool. You also want to fund the trust, but you don't want all the other siblings to see the Special Needs Trust as the big sucking sound. Everyone follow what I'm saying? Yep, you want to provide for the one that has the greatest needs, but you don't want the others to, the last word to be, well, they want the money. So life insurance quite frequently enables a family to fund a trust well without having to take the resources away from the siblings that you're hoping will look favorably upon participating and being supportive when you're gone. I think everybody kind of sees what I'm saying with that. Yep. Now, one type of coverage that we use a lot is called second to die up there. And second to die is a type of life insurance most people have never heard of, because for the last century, that's been the best kept secret of the super wealthy. And that coverage was used to pay the federal estate tax bill when the second spouse died. So wealthy families, every family you've heard in the news, covers of magazines, the super wealthy would accumulate second to die coverage in the hundreds of millions of dollars because the federal estate tax bill comes due with the second spouse's death. And they didn't want to lose half of the company, half of the land, half of the commercial business and holdings and this type of thing. And wealthy families are not liquid. They did not become wealthy with large bank balances. They became wealthy by deploying the funds into companies and investments, et cetera, so they're illiquid, and it's very inconvenient to have to pay 40, 45, 50% of your estate worth at the time of death. And so many families have literally lost family businesses, large tracts of land, farmers, et cetera. So survivorship life pays a benefit upon the second death. Well, it has something to do with special needs planning, because where there are two parents, that's typically the point of concern. When the loved one with special needs no longer has a parental advocate. Everybody see what I'm saying? Second spouse has died, next generation's coming up. We use that coverage a lot because it's a discounted way to guarantee the trust gets funded and gets funded tax-free. Okay, so Deb kind of did the able accounts and special needs trusts. So titling your assets. So consumer transference through parent, top left there, that's one way. One way to fund a third-party special needs trust, because if their money becomes your money is welcome in a third-party trust where there's no Medicaid lien. So how do you make their money your money? Well, Wormington, right, Wormington? Okay. You make it kind of expensive to live at the Wormington estate. So you basically charge for everything. So that way, Social Security and earned income that comes into their side of the ledger goes over to your side of the ledger as a reimbursement. What are you being reimbursed for? Every expense that you're incurring. So for Social Security purposes, it may be their share of the mortgage payment, utilities, and food. But we all know that there is just a laundry list of other things, such as Wi-Fi, internet access, cell phone, Netflix, cable or satellite TV, sporting events, concerts, travel, vacation, clothing, on and on the list goes. And so you put together a consummate list of what it costs to stay at the estate, and it's like an all-inclusive resort. And then on a monthly basis, you do a transference from them to you to reimburse for all of those expenses. And then once that transfer has occurred, it's now whose money? Your money. Your money's welcome in a third-party trust where you can summarily deposit it on their behalf, invest the funds, and that's a trust that has no Medicaid lien, which means the state does not get to recover from that trust at the time of their passing. So a well-funded third-party trust is not only amazing for retaining quality of life for your loved one with special needs, but what's left in that trust catches up with the siblings that you're wanting to be supportive. Does everyone see the win-win? Yeah, there's a benefit for everyone. Very powerful as far as planning is concerned. So consumer transference through the parent. The asset goes from the child, adult child, to the parent, from the parent into the third-party trust. Gifting. You can gift to a special needs trust. How much? And like Deb was so kind to mention earlier, while you have a $16,000 limit with Enable annually, the only limit for special needs trust is $16,000 per person giving, per person receiving, and that's only if you want to avoid filing a gift tax return. So if you had 20 people lined up, they could each give $16,000 to the special needs trust every year. So every grandparent, great aunt, uncle, anyone that wants to get in on it can gift $16,000 per year to the special needs trust. Now, please understand, a special needs trust is not a 501c3, so we are not talking about making a tax-deductible gift. Does everybody follow? Okay? It's not a charity. A 501c3 or a charity cannot function for the benefit of a single individual. It does not work that way. So we're not looking for making a tax deduction. However, they can make gifts to the trust, get the asset out of their estate, and therefore they're not paying 1099, getting 1099s or paying income on interest, dividends, and capital gains. It's in the trust, and you can go grow the trust. Now, 25 years ago, we didn't see many of these trusts funded while the parents were living, but that is totally flipped. Now, it's very common for the trust not only to be set up, but for the trust to start being funded while the parents are still living. And from where? Well, from the transference, meaning with the child having more money than we can handle because we have to keep them under $2,000, the transfer to the parents, then from the parents into the third-party trust, grandparents making deposits into the third-party trust. I even have somebody that set up a GoFundMe account up in West Lafayette, a pastor of a church, well-known, a child with significant or very meaningful special needs, and raised over $100,000. And that went into the third-party trust with no Medicaid lien and so forth. So a lot of creative things that we're able to do. Going to the right, further beneficiary on life insurance and retirement accounts. So retirement accounts with the Secure Act is amazing, but even life insurance you currently have, your group life insurance, the term policy you carry, maybe that old whole life policy you've been thinking about surrendering. Well, maybe you just make the trust the beneficiary. Maybe a universal life policy, whatever. But life insurance by way of beneficiary can go, and life insurance delivers a benefit tax-free, which means 100% of the value of that or benefit of that goes into the trust. Really exciting stuff. Or in some cases, we create life insurance, like the survivorship life that I mentioned, where the life insurance benefit is delivered tax-free and the premium is discounted. And indirectly through the transference to you, your child, in essence, can indirectly help you pay the life insurance premium that guarantees their quality of life when you're gone. Transfer on death, those are for investment accounts, non-retirement investment accounts. So there we're talking about mutual funds that you may have, a stock account, an E-Trade account, or that type of thing. If you put a TOD on it to the special needs trust upon your death, the financial institution delivers the investments, the assets, directly to the special needs trust. Now, while we're on the subject, please understand it doesn't work for it to go to your child with special needs and then say, oh, we didn't mean that, and then move it from there to the third-party trust. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? This has got to go directly to the trust. Okay, it doesn't work for them to inherit and then say, oh no, we're going to uninherit them and now put it in the trust. Because once they inherit, you're talking first-party trust with a Medicaid lien. It's really important to connect them with that trust and have whatever assets you want to leave for their benefit to go directly to the trust. Does everybody follow that? It's not okay to have a will that just says something happens to me, it divides up among the 4 kids, and then we'll just figure out the trust thing once the kid inherits. Because you're talking, again, first-party trust with a Medicaid lien. The trust needs to exist before you die, and then beneficiaries transfer on death, or bank assets such as CDs or money market accounts, POD, payable on death, they need to already designate before you're passing the special needs trust. So we help with that. We help families with that in terms of updating all of those things. And then something that you may have not heard about, irrevocable life insurance trust. That's a life insurance trust where actually the special needs trust owns the life insurance. And that way the trust owns it, trust pays the premium, trust receives the benefit upon the death of the insured, and it's out of your estate entirely. And it guarantees that the trust is going to be funded because the trust already owns the life insurance before you die. So trust is definitely receiving the proceeds because the trust owns the policy. There's no way it's going to be directed elsewhere. Okay, it's important to work with people that do this every day because this is way too complicated for someone to kind of polish up on the weekend or something. I've made a 25-year study of it, and I'm still studying. But I love doing it. I've always looked at my practice and my service as the sweet side of special needs, meaning God said, I'm going to give you a kid with lots of challenges, but with it is going to come the gift of service. And, it has been sweet. And I'm not anywhere near exiting. Now that my hair is thin and turning gray and a few wrinkles, people do ask, well, what about when you retire? And I'm like, having a bad day here or what, So I figure I'm good for at least another 10 years, and people seem to like that, and I'm thankful that they continue to have me as a part of their special needs journey. It is such a joy to help families with this. That's the office location. It's also in your folders, of course, and on the practice brochure, etc. And am I somewhere near time?
Whenever we can start with questions.
Okay, all right. Then I'm I think, open to questions at this point. And I think Deb's going to come up to field any on able accounts and so forth. And I tell you, it is such an honor to share the podium with Deb. If you don't know the Easter days, make a point to get to know them. What an incredible family, a family that has given, and given so much and over decades. Really inspiring. Sorry to make you uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. Okay.
I'm going to gather the evaluations, if that's okay. While you
Oh,
do the
yes,
questions.
please do, so we can do the drawing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm trying to get out of this if we can. Okay. I'm trying. Technology, you know.
I know nothing about technology.
Oh, well, questions for Heath? Yeah, and I may have a name of a family or two. That's why I really feel like I need to get this down. There, okay, blessings, thank you. Questions that anyone would like to ask of Deb or myself, and thank you so much for finishing up your evaluation forms. I see at least one left-hander in the group. Thank you for that. Questions that anybody would like to ask? And thank you. Thank you for whatever hoops you had to jump through for being here this evening. I know it's not easy. I understand that. I'm so thankful that you, did what you had to be here. And yes.
It's not the topic, but Deb mentioned the representative payee accounts. Are those also limited to $2,000?
Okay. Do you want, or you want me to?
They're going to count as your resource, as part of your resources. So it may be even less than $2,000 if you've got other resources out there, yeah.
While we're on that subject, though, I do generally recommend that you limit what goes in and comes out of the representative payee account to be Social Security only. So if they pick up part-time employment, set up a second account, because Social Security will electronically monitor the representative payee account, and especially if you're dealing with an SSI issue, they've been known to send letters years after the fact and give you detailed banking records on the representative payee account and referencing the months you went over $2,000, and they want the money back.
And I am one stupid example of that very thing. So I know the answer very clearly.
Yeah, so don't let them stick their nose in any more of your business than necessary. That's my thought. Other questions, and I see some familiar faces. It warms my heart. Thank you. Oh, yes.
So, taking a look at all the options, and I'm the legal guardian of Elizabeth here, and so she, I can't see really any disadvantage to the ABLE account except for, and that would be for depositing all of her employment income, and then she gets her Social Security income separately. And it seems like the only thing I can see that would be the disadvantage would be the end of life, taking it back for their Medicaid expenses. And then it's sort of like the 529 plan where you've said that you get 20% of the first 2,500, which is like $500, but on the 529 plan, you get a credit of like $1,000.
So allow me to say just a couple of things. Think of primarily ABLE accounts as put and take, save and spend.
Oh, would you restate the question?
Okay, yes, restating the question, kind of trying to discern the pros and cons, the disadvantages of ABLE or advantages, disadvantages. So I'm a proponent of ABLE accounts. I was hesitant initially, but the farther we go along, I see what ABLE accounts can really do to help. It's not a panacea in every situation. I think most individuals that have special needs do need a special needs trust. ABLE is not a given in every situation, but boy, it can really solve problems. Please understand that ABLE accounts are primarily designed to solve resource issues. They do not solve income issues. Okay? And as long as you focus on solving resource issues, keeping under the $2,000, ABLE can be a godsend. And it can be a godsend not just for recurring situations, but even the lump sum things, the unexpected inheritance of $5,000 or $10,000 from that great uncle, and who would have ever thunk it? And now what are we going to do with this $10,000 that's coming in? You can throw it in an ABLE and call it a day because it's no longer considered a resource. And if they have part-time employment, you want to teach them to save. What a great opportunity for them to have a financial account and teach them delayed gratification or saving toward a trip or some goal, and it counts nothing against their government benefits. So the opportunity to do a put and take, save it, and then eventually spend it is ideal with an ABLE versus kind of a lifetime accumulation where the state eventually takes it. But I do want to distinguish versus income, because there are some income issues with regards, we didn't get into it much, and I'll keep it very brief. But there are basically three figures that are critical with special needs, and if you want to write these down, it's not a bad idea. One is the $2,000 resource limit that's been mentioned repeatedly. The reason that comes up so often is it's not just a SSI issue, but that's a Medicaid issue. And when you start messing with somebody's Medicaid waiver, oh, you've got the parent's attention in a heartbeat. Yeah. Okay, so the $2,000 resource limit, and that's everything basically that's under the consumer's Social Security number or associated with them if their name is a part of the registration, et cetera. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. Number two, the SGA limit, substantial gainful activity limit for Social Security. This is really important because if your kid exceeds this repeatedly, they may poison the well and not be able to draw off of the parent's wage record, which is where we're talking $1,500, $2,000 a month, et cetera. And sometimes parents are not even aware that the well is being poisoned because they're going over the $1,350 limit, and Social Security, unfortunately, does not forget. But keep in mind, $1,350, what is that? Gross earned income. That does not count Social Security benefits. It's gross earned income, not net, not take home, but gross earned income. The third limit is because we are a 1634 state, there is an overarching income limit to maintain eligibility for Medicaid and therefore by extension Medicaid waiver services. And that limit is $2,523 for this current calendar year, $25.23 per month. Now, where we're running into problems with that is where a person is drawing off of a parent's wage record. So let me give you a quick example. Even before the parent passed away, the family that was in today, before the father passed away, the child was drawing off of the parent's his Social Security record, so he was already getting, let's say, $1,400 a month. So if the consumer's receiving Social Security of $1,400 a month, and then they get part-time employment and they're earning $1,000 a month, you can start to see how they can brush up against that 25-23. And now he's going to be at $2,100 a month because of the passing of his father, and at $2,100 a month, he's only $400 a month away, the smallest, little bittiest of part-time employment, from hitting up against that 25-23. Now, when you get up against the 25-23, then we're talking Miller Trust. Did Bob talk about?
Very briefly.
Yeah. So then you're getting into what we call D4B territory or Miller Trust territory. Definitely not time for that this evening. But the third limit you need to be aware of is 25-23, and that will change for next year. It goes up every year with cost of living, and that's the overarching. That counts everything. It counts gifts, $100 for birthday, plus, $1,500 for Social Security, plus part-time employment. They count it all. And if they go north of 25-23, they lose eligibility for their disability Medicaid, and therefore, by extension, Medicaid waiver services. And so there is a fix for that. But that's the third limit. And if you're like, oh, we're SSI, we're $300 a month in part-time employment, we're nowhere near that, don't worry about it. But it may come in time when they draw off of a parent's record. Now they're drawing $1,500 to $2,000 a month in Social Security, and they're still maintaining part-time employment. But those are the three limits: $2,000 resource, income $1,350, and overarching income $2,523. ABLE will not solve the $1,350, meaning if their gross wages are $1,500, they can't throw $200 in an ABLE account and say, oh, I really only earn $1,300. Does everybody follow what I'm saying? It will not solve an earned income issue. And ABLE will also not solve the 25-23 monthly income issue. Resource, absolutely, but not income. And so we have other strategies, other options at our disposal to solve the income issues. But those are really three critically important numbers to at least be aware of.
How is that 23 determined? And is there some formula for how much it is? So
Yep.
we know, like when January after we figure
Yep,
all
thanks
the
for
numbers?
asking. Absolutely. Very simple formula. Maximum SSI benefit is declared annually times 3. That easy. If you take 841 currently, that's the maximum monthly SSI benefit in the state of Indiana. Take it times 3. Because we're a 1634 state, that's what it's always going to be. Maximum SSI times 3.
And is that number available, like on Social Security website? in the beginning of January?
Yeah, they will declare the SSI maximum benefit each year. They usually put out a single sheet that has all the updates for the new calendar year. Whatever the maximum SSI benefit, that's times 3. And even if your child is no longer on SSI because they're drawing the adult child benefit, it still applies as 3 times whatever that maximum SSI benefit is. They're still subject to it.
But you can count on that if you're a
Yes,
1634.
absolutely, right.
Okay.
And you either keep them under it, or we have to get a D4B trust to put the excess into. Because otherwise, again, you're risking loss of Medicaid waiver services. Yeah, and yeah.
You said draw off a parent's record. Is that parent or legal guardian? Or-
Okay, great question. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you?
That's why this is a great question.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So there is a bank of individuals that a person can potentially attach to when it deals with drawing an adult child benefit. So it is a biological parent, even if they've never met the person. If the parent's on the birth certificate, they're in. So that's one. Biological parents, where typically there would be 2. Okay. Then you also have step parent, if dependent. So if they are being declared as a dependent, then they can potentially draw off of a step parent. And then an adoptive parent that's not bio or step necessarily, but an adoptive parent they're eligible for. As far as drawing off of a legal guardian, I think the potential exists, but that's a stretch. Those are more difficult situations and would have to be looked at on an individual basis. But it's more than just one biological parent. And it sometimes comes in steps, meaning it's the first parent that draws Social Security disability, draws Social Security retirement, this type of thing. And then maybe the next parent that they can attach to has a bigger earnings record. And so now they go to the next one. They can move that 2 or 3 times before it's over with, ultimately resting with whoever had the biggest earnings record. And this affects when we as parents decide to retire. So the domino and ripple effect on this stuff is really significant. It's not contained in this nice little bubble. When you decide to start drawing Social Security retirement benefits, has significant ripple effect upon your adult child with special needs, and that effect lasts their lifetime, even if it's decades after you're long gone. Really important. Yeah. Again, that's why we may want to at some point do a session on government benefits. It is not boring. Like this young gentleman was saying early on. You all are never boring. Government benefits, I'm telling you, it is not boring. You will be like, wow, who would have thought? When you study this stuff and then start to unpack it, it's fascinating. Of course, at the same time, my wife occasionally says our son's nut did not fall far from the tree, but that was an attempt at humor. Okay. All right. What else?
It's already 10 after, so we're probably going to have to wrap it up. I don't know if you have time to stick around for a few questions.
Sure.
If they have
Yeah.
individual
I'm close to
questions.
home. I'm very thankful. Very.
Do you want to do a drawing?
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, out come the readers, and we've got Mary Kelly. Okay. All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. What a blessing to spend the evening with you. And again, at some point, if you want me to come back, we can delve on any of these subjects. Fascinating, but most interesting. You may get an email from Jamie Sturchy, our parent advocate, so that if you do have questions that won't wait till a future session, we want to be there for you, that type of thing. But thanks so much. Thanks for the invite, Deb. What a blessing to be able to visit with you and the whole ILADD organization. Amazing stuff going on here.
Thank you very much, Gordon. He mentioned doing another session on government benefits, and that is actually on our calendar for our October events. So we have 2 that are coming up in October. They will be the final events educationally for this year. I don't have a gift card to give away, but I would love to get you guys to fill out the ILADD survey. Again, please tell us anything that would be helpful to you as you move forward on this independence journey, and we would love to be able to offer the topics and the classes that are most meaningful to you guys. So appreciate that. Matt, do you have any closing?
Yeah, thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions about ILADD if anyone has any.
Thanks for coming, and we'll see you around in the future. Thanks.